Sorry, y'all, I'm spicy. It's Friday afternoon. This is why we do this on Tuesdays, so that I don't become the actual talk about this. Okay, men, are we ready to kick off here?
Yes, 100%. If you have any questions, please write them into the chat box. But other than that, enjoy the webinar.
We're going in. So, welcome everyone to webinar 5. This is webinar 5 after obviously the first 4. First one was diagnostic selling, what it is. Second one was what you can challenge between steps 1 and 2. Third one is the 12 problems. The fourth one, we went into what you should demo on. And this is going to be number 5, which is how can you gather all of the information in order to diagnose? So before we do that, if y'all would jump in the chat, tell me, were you at webinars? Yes or no? Just so I can get a good read on the room. I'm not going to spend too much time on the precursors, but I want to get a good read of, we've got yes, no, just 4 for me. Okay. We've got mostly no. Okay. Okay. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to dive in here and we're going to cover 3 parts and we're going to do it all in an hour instead of 90 minutes time. So I'm going to go ahead and share my deck. But the first part, the 3 parts we're going to cover is the first part we're going to go into is what are the steps of diagnosis. We're going to cover it briefly for everyone who has seen the other 4 webinars. We're going to cover it briefly. What are you diagnosing within diagnostic selling? What is discovery meant for, etc. Second part we're going to go into is what are the 4 things that you need to learn about your buyers in general. And then the third part is going to be what do you need to each buyer in specific. So those are going to be the 3 parts that we're going to get into. So part 1 is diagnostic selling and what it is and what it isn't. So I have to cover this because obviously most of the people haven't been to the other 4 webinars, but I'm going to be quick here and spend about 10 minutes on it. But essentially within the infrastructure of diagnostic selling, what you're trying to do within discovery is you're trying to diagnose. That's the job of a seller, at least in my opinion, is you're trying to diagnose what is going on with them so that you can help them. So we're really trying to influence the sale. So influence is defined as effect by the way of change. So when your buyer comes in, they say they need, they say they want something, etc. And you're trying to diagnose so that hypothetically you can change something. There are 2 buckets to that. You can change something that they believe that is incorrect, or you can change the fact that they didn't know about something that does exist. So those are really the 2 parts. So part 1 of this, which is diagnostic selling, we're going to go into why you diagnose, what you would diagnose, and how you would diagnose. But I'm going to try to do all of this in 10 minutes. It's just review. So the only expertise of a seller, as we said, is to diagnose. Otherwise, in my opinion, it's a fired up opinion, but they're just an order taker. Comes up and they're like, I want a number 3. And you're like, okay, let me put that order down or let me demo you on those features. So from the prospect's value though, from the prospect's view, when they come into a discovery call, they're looking for information that they don't know. What they're normally used to is that they don't know one thing that they believe you do know as a seller. Let's see if anyone can jump in the chat and guess what that is. They believe that you as a seller know one thing that they don't know that they believe that you know as a seller. Let's see if anyone can guess that. And they usually ask for it in a demo right off the bat. It's the one data point that they're after. Monica got it. Price. So like you know the price because you're a salesperson and I don't know the price. So they always come in and right off the bat, they want pricing. So what I'm going to challenge everyone to do today is to be able to diagnose, to come up with other information that they didn't know so that you can add value. So the value of a salesperson isn't pricing. Otherwise, we just do it on the website. It'd be much quicker. But the additional value that a prospect can get in a discovery call is going to be information that they didn't know. It's always going to be hinged on that. So if you're anchoring into pain selling, pain is something they already knew. The problem they want to solve is something they already knew. The impact that they believe to be true is something they already knew. So you have to diagnose things that they don't know to be worth it as a seller from a price tag perspective. So there is a cost to having a seller involved. then I feel bad. I might buy something because of buyers, because I feel guilty. There's pressure on me. So there is an inherent price tag. So how you can outrun that price tag is by basically diagnosing information that they didn't know. So the first point of why you would diagnose, in short, is they're going to come in on the inbound line and they're going to say, I want this or I need this. And the reason that you would diagnose is they might be wrong. I'm going rapid speed here. They might be wrong. In my experience, they're usually wrong. With a diagnosis, they're going to be wrong about 90% of the time, meaning they diagnose something incorrectly. But with something that they missed in their diagnosis, it's 100% of the time, in my experience, regardless of what I've been selling. But why you would diagnose is to uncover one of two things. So on the left-hand side, you're going to see your buyer self-diagnosis. And the right-hand side, you're going to see the one thing that I very rarely is you develop your own diagnosis as an account executive. And the two things that you're trying to surface to the top is a misdiagnosis, something that they believe that is not, or a missed diagnosis, something that they didn't catch when they were self-diagnosing at all. So research will tell you that people, there are a number of different stats, Gartner stats, Forrester stats, that basically point out that people will look at 20 different mediums before they request a demo of self-research. Peers, industry influencers, reviews, on and on they go. But people are having to self-diagnose anyway. So they're trying to get ahead of the buyer's journey by researching everything beforehand. So the value you can add in the second bucket is by uncovering a diagnosis, something that's going wrong, something that will go wrong in the future, an impact that's going to happen in the future that they didn't know about. So great example of this is everyone sell to someone once they already have pain. But I very rarely see someone selling to someone before they incur the pain. That's where you're going to gain trust. That's where you're going to gain credibility, is that you don't make the buyer run into the pain. You predict it ahead of time. So everyone wants to sell ticketing systems to Southwest Airlines now. But if you can get ahead of that and help them before it happens, that's where you're really going to gain that credibility in the room. So why you would diagnose is two things: correct a misdiagnosis and find a misdiagnosis. So what you would diagnose, again, I'm trying to go as fast as I can here. What you would diagnose, simply 7 things. The problem, which is the thing that they want to solve or solve for. And it's always going to be anchored to their buyer persona metric. One of the biggest hiccups or sidesteps that I see people doing is they think they solve the same problem for every single buyer persona. Or on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 7 or an 8. I'm like, if you take a step back, that means on a scale of 1 to 10, you're an 8 in terms of product selling, product-centric selling. So a problem is only going to be a problem in the presence of a metric. So if I'm a BDR, for instance, the problem I'm going to be solved is always going to be anchored around SQL. How many SQLs am I booking? If I am a sales rep, for instance, okay, so how many in here are sellers? If you jump in the chat, if you're AE or you're an SDR, if you could give your role. Let's see who's who in here. Are you an AE? We got a BDM, AE, AE, AE. So Mike, I'm going to pick on you. Mike, I'm going to guess that you showed up to today's session because you want to, in some way, positively affect your closed won quota attainment. Am I right or am I wrong? Picking on just correct. Bada bing. I don't need to know Mike. I don't need to know anything about him. I don't need to know where he's at, what organization he's at. All I need to know is his role. If he's an AE, he's trying to do something around positively affecting his quota attainment. If you're a BDR, you're trying to positively affect an SQL number. If you're a marketer, you're trying to positively affect an MQL number or demo request. If you're a CRO, you're trying to positively affect a revenue number. If you're a CSM, you're trying to renewal rate, NPS score, upsell or cross sell. But everything is always going to be anchored to some metric. So the problem is the problem is simply the thing that they're trying to solve or solve for in order to get an outcome and avoid or inherit the future. That's what people are solving for. So that's the first piece. The second piece is going to be the root cause. So the root cause is the thing that they need to change to affect the problem, to solve the problem. So for instance, if I'm going to pick on Mike, sorry, Mike, if Mike was, let's say, hypothetically trying to hit his quota, let's say he was sub 10%, the root cause that he's identified in his mind might be, I need to know more about my buyer so my discovery conversations are better. So the root cause that needs to change is his knowledge of what he needs to hypothetically know so that he can improve his conversion, so that he can hit his close ones. So the root cause is the thing that they're trying to change in order to solve the problem. So that's the second piece. The third piece is going to be the current impacts that you would diagnose. So that is the extended pain that is linked to the problem. So for instance, let's say that someone's not hitting quota. Let's use a BDR leader, for instance. The problem that they want to solve is that they want to hit quota. The root cause that they believe is the quality of their messaging and their emails. The current impact is not only missing their quota, but their entire team is missing their quota. And the VP of sales is breathing down their neck of like, our AEs are missing quota because of the pipeline. So the current impact is not just the pain of I'm missing quota, but it's my entire team is. I'm losing internal credibility. And the VP of sales and AEs are also missing quota because of us. It's the pain or pleasure, in most cases, pain currently that's linked to the future impact is going to be the thing that's in the future that they're trying to avoid. This is what usually So, for instance, if there was a lag right now with my internet, that would be pain. But if it was just me and Min, it wouldn't actually be a problem because there's no real impact. It's just me and Min. A webinar, for instance, the current impact could have been that 200 other people can't hear me. The future impact of that would be if I still have webinar after webinar after webinar that lags and lags and lags, my database, people won't start coming to webinars because they're like, I can't hear her. I can't understand the information. So I'm going to churn from her webinars. And let's say I had, hypothetically, I don't anymore, but hypothetically that I had a sponsor that is paying for leads. So the future impact that I'm trying to avoid is sponsor churn because there's no more leads. So the problem I'm trying to solve is that my internet is faster and there's no lag. And the root cause is, let's say I'm using some type of Wi-Fi. So the thing that is mobilizing me to buy is the sponsor churning. The problem that I'm trying to solve to not get the sponsor to churn is lead flow, the internet. And the root cause is something from a technical perspective with the internet. So future impact is going to be what is mobilizing someone to actually do something about the situation. The current event trigger, this is going to be the last thing that happened that made the pain egregious enough in the present, or the impact big enough in the future, or their belief that it will happen, that they finally said, okay, I'm going to solve for it. So let's say the VP of sales came to them and said like, hey, honestly, y'all are sub quota. been sub quota for a while. So we'll see how we do this next couple months. But if we can't get past quota, then we might need to evaluate what our next step. The current event trigger was a conversation with the VP. But what that made me believe was there's a future impact that I was going to get canned if I didn't hit my numbers. So it's going to be the last thing that made the person trigger to actually solve the problem. A future event trigger is something that's going to happen in the future that's going to cause an impact in the future that's mobilizing someone to buy today. So let's say that typically at 4 p.m., I'm dehydrated. So the pain is that I'm dehydrated. There is a little bit of pain in the present. But let's imagine that the future event trigger is I know the next day or whatever that I'm going to be going on a walk for 4 hours in the desert and there's no water in the desert. So the future event trigger is that I'm going to have to go, I'm going on a walk in the desert. The future impact that I'm trying to avoid is that I die in the desert. The current impact is that I'm thirsty, I'm walking slower, which is the pain. So the problem that I'm trying to solve is that I have water. And the root cause is I haven't bought it so far. So the event trigger is what is the thing, what is the event that is happening in the future that's mobilizing me to buy today? So let's say, for instance, you're gonna get married. That's your event trigger. You had pain in the present that you weren't super comfortable with your body, but the current impact wasn't high enough. The future impact, though, of you not having the body of your dreams in your head for your wedding is there's photos, people, and so you're going to have to live with those photos forever. So the future event trigger is the wedding, but that's going to mobilize me to say, okay, I'm going to go buy a gym membership today. So these happen quite frequently. And the last thing is solution. The 7 things you would diagnose in short are the problem, the root cause, current impact, future impact, current event, future event trigger, or a solution. Just as kind of a heads up, and then we're going to go to the third part and transition over, is they'll usually either have a current event trigger or a future event trigger, not both. That's how it's going to go. Okay. How you can diagnose. There's only 3 steps. First step, this is the most on topic I've ever stayed on in a webinar. Like, is anyone for me? I feel like I'm sweating. So Mark wanted to jump into the content. Okay, step 1. This is the easiest step by far. And it's a step that most sellers do, is uncover the buyer's self-diagnosis. So they're typically only going to come in with a certain amount. You're not asking them to self-diagnose. You're just uncovering what they have self-diagnosed. They come into the room and they're like, hey, so I need, the reason I reached out to you today is I had seen you online and I want cold email training. If someone can jump in the chat and take a stab at that, they said they need cold email training. What is that? Is that a problem, a root cause, a current impact, a future impact, event trigger, a future event trigger, or a solution? They say they need cold email training. Which one of those is that? Let's see if anyone's gonna jump in and bail me out. Bingo, you all got it. Solution. So I know that the self-diagnosis, I've got one of the criteria. They think the self-diagnosed solution is cold email training. I know that they think that they need cold email training. But what do I not know? Let's see if y'all can jump in the chat. What do I not know? They think that they need cold email training. But what do I not know at this point in the conversation? Current trigger. Brilliant, Monica. The sad thing is 90% of reps will stop there. They'll go, okay, well, let me show you all the features of the cold email training. Doran, brilliant. Why do they think that? I don't know the problem they're trying to solve. I don't know how aggressive it is. I don't know what the true root cause is. I know it finally made them buy. So if they say I need cold email training, from a tactical perspective, how I get there is I'm like, okay, so if you don't mind me asking, hypothetically, what problem are you trying to solve with the cold email training? And I lead them straight there. They're like, yeah, so my reps, have been a little bit below quota. I just think our cold emails are trash. And I'm like, so why do you think that? Can you show me an example? What's your open rate? What's your reply rate? And I'm trying to diagnose why they think that the problem that they need to solve is quota and why they think that their cold emails are the root cause. So at that point, I have to diagnose solution. The problem that they want to solve is something quota, and they believe that the root cause is their cold emails. So when I'm asking questions to fill in these gaps, I'm not only gathering their self-diagnosis information, but it also is helping me build my own diagnosis, which is step. So these are really going to be in tandem with each other. And I'll give you an example. If someone says, "Yeah, my cold emails are trash," I'm like, "Well, what do you mean by that? Why do you say that?" "Yeah, well, we just can't get any opens, you know." And like I've taken a look and they're just bad. I'm like, "Can you show me an example? Can you share your screen?" They'll be like, "Our open rate, is bad." I'm like, "Well, what's bad? Bad like 10, bad like," and they're like, "No, it's 15." And in my head, I'm like, I'll buy that cold email quality is part of it, but that actually has helped me diagnose something that they're probably not thinking about, which is email deliverability. So I'm like, oop, they probably have an email delivery issue. Let's double down here and find out if this is an actual root cause. So step one is I'm going in for those 7 pieces. I'm not asking them to self-diagnose, but I'm trying to figure out if they have self-diagnosed. Usually they have self-diagnosed root cause, problem, solution, and future impact, but they won't give it up to you. They'll always talk about solution. A lot of times they'll talk about root cause, but people will very rarely from the jump lead with the problem. Let me see. I've never asked this question live. Let me see if anyone can guess why. Why would I not lead with my reps are only at 30%? And that's why I'm here today. Let's see if anyone can guess why they're not going to lead there. Yeah, Britt, brilliant. It's painful and it looks bad on them. And you got to keep in mind, they don't trust you yet. To Robert's point, that yeah, ego, trust, it's embarrassing. And like, here's the thing, we all have problems, certainly myself included. But that's why the saying goes, you should always tell your doctor, or to tell your doctor the truth sometimes. Because even though they're an expert and even though they can help you, it's hard to admit, like, hey, I eat 2 baguettes in the middle of the night, which for me is the truth. I'm like, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to say that you have some conditions or admit to some things or admit to some behaviors so that you come to the solution. So step one is uncover their self-diagnosis. What have they self-diagnosed? Step 2 is develop your own diagnosis, meaning what do I believe the problem is? What do I believe the root causes or causes are? What do I believe the current impact is? What do I believe the future impacts are? What do I believe are the things that are currently happening that make the problem we're solving? What are the future events that I believe are going to happen in the future that make this problem solving today? And what do I think the solutions are? Here's a quick litmus test that might help that you're doing this somewhat correctly. The reason we have a doctor is because typically speaking, even when a patient's self-diagnosed, they're incorrect. So it's illegal to acquire medication, prescriptive medication, without talking to someone. And it's because they have to correct a certain number of things. So if you do me a favor and you don't chat about this, but just later in your deals, if you can document 2 things, step 1 and step 2, for my last 10 deals, what did they think the problem was? What did they think the root cause was? What did they think the current impact was? What did they think the future impact was? What did they think those 7 things were? And what did I think those 7 things were? And if there is not a different list with those 2, for at least at minimum 60% of your deals, then you are not developing your own expert diagnosis. You're taking them at their word. They're saying, I need this medication because this is the root cause and this is a problem I need to solve. And you're going, okay. And you're asking a couple questions and continuing on. Because reality is, it's not their expertise to know. So if in 60% of deals, you can't note down what they believed and what you believed, and there isn't a difference between those 2 lists, meaning something they believe that wasn't correct, and then something that they missed entirely. And it's a good litmus test to you that step 2 isn't happening. All I'm acquiring is that first step. So the second step is, what do I believe those 7 items are? And then the third step is going to be diagnose the unknown problems. For me, the back half is the most fun, because then I get to find all the things that they didn't know, candidly. So it just opens their world up. I spent 20 minutes instead of 10. I'm really sorry. Sorry, Mark. I'm going to get to part 2 and 3 now. So part 2 and 3 now are, this is all great. I know I need to do this. I know I need to diagnose, but what do I need to learn to be able to do this? And where can I get all that information? Those are the 2 questions we're going to answer in the second half of the presentation. Yes, Darian, it's a technical question. It's a great question. Please explain the difference between current event triggers versus root cause. Is root cause why and current event what? So basically, a root cause is the thing that you need to change to absolve the problem. But the current event trigger is the last thing that happened that made the impact big enough, their belief that the impact would happen, the pain big enough. There's a number of different current event triggers, but it's basically the last event that tipped the scales to where the current event trigger, or where the impact was big enough, so they decided to solve for it. Say, for instance, you have your VP. This happened yesterday. Someone said, "Okay, so I'm because I want to get some scripts, blah blah." And I'm like, "Okay, walk me through your current setup, blah blah." They're going through and they're like, "So our quota is only meetings, but we're actually hitting 12 meetings." I'm like, "Then I'm confused. What problem are we trying to solve?" I'm like, "Well, I'm trying to solve that my outreach is trash." And I'm like, "Well, why do you say that?" And they're like, "Well, I've taken a look at the emails, and they don't look that great, especially for the inbounds." I'm like, "Can you show me an example?" And I'm like, "Okay, they could use a little work in my head." And I'm like, "So how long have the emails been in this condition? Have you been sending these emails?" And they were like, for the last 7 or 8 months." And I'm like, "You've been at the organization for 2 years." I'm like, "So you were here the whole time. If you don't mind me asking, why now?" They're like, "Well, someone tried to inbound, and the messaging that they got was so bad that they posted on LinkedIn about it. And they tagged my VP of sales, CRO, and CEO in on the post. Then they sent an email about lackluster follow-up to everyone from a C-level perspective, with me CC'd in." So the pain was, they knew the emails were bad, but the current event trigger was the post. So it made the impact so bad, they said, "I have to solve for it." They knew they were bad the whole time, but it wasn't worth solving until that current event trigger. So it's an event that happens that makes that person want to buy. Usually for the current event trigger, future event trigger, they'll have one or the other. It's either something that just happened, or something that's going to happen that's mobilizing them to change today so they avoid a future impact. Great question, really technical question. Okay, part 2. Divided this into 2 parts. Part 2 is going to be the 4 types of data that you need to learn for buyer personas in general. Then part 3 is going to be the types you learn from like each person in specific. Here's the thing. I'm so excited about this section. And I really mean this from the bottom of my heart. It is much, first of all, I am so, so happy that everyone showed up, came to this session because it means that you want to learn about your buyer, which is great. And what 99% of people don't want to do. But it is so much easier than you think. This is the second thing. So if you haven't learned anything about your buyer, and today's the first day, that's completely okay. That's what most of the sales industry is. They have some little deck on personas and they're onboarding. But these are going to be the 4 types of data. If I were to do it all over again as an SDR, as an AE, on and on, the first thing I would do at an organization is aggressively start to study my buyer's world. Because the more you know, the more potential that the buyer persona you're talking to doesn't know the information that you know. So the more likely that they want you in the room. It's more likely you can get outbound meetings, the more likely that they want to stay with you and stick with you and keep you involved as a seller and upsell and cross sell and X, Y, and Z. So if I were to pull one lever against my competitors, it would be I'm going to outlearn them. I knew at the beginning when I started Flip the Script, I'm like going against major industry sales trainers. I mean, I'm not even going to name any of them for legal perspective, but like global companies, tenured assets, all of this. I'm like, I have to learn more than every single sales trainer out there. In my mind, I thought the marker needs to be, I need to know 4x more than them to have a shot in the room. So I aggressively started studying as much as I could, and the world that it opened up to me was just incredible. So here are the 4 types of data that I would dive into. First one first, for your buyer personas, you need to identify their metrics. So if you don't know them, that's okay. Ain't no don't blame it. So you need to identify 3 metrics. So if this is a little bit small, if you download the one sheeter and this is all detailed out, the first thing you need to know is their lagging indicator. It's the final thing that they're hired, fired, promoted, and demoted to drive. The second thing you need to know is their leading indicators, meaning the inputs that you would change to affect the lagging indicator. And then the third thing you need to know is the leaning indicator. They're also known as coincidental indicators, which they're a metric to measure performance, but they aren't the end all goal that someone is hired and fired to drive. So let's see if anyone can guess this. A lagging indicator for SDRs is meetings booked and quota attainment. Leading indicator, something they would change to get there, is email quality or quantity, for instance. What is an example of a leaning indicator for an SDR? It's not what their ultimate metric hired and fired to drive, but it is a good example. It's a good resultant metric that they're on the right path. And people think about it all day long. Not numbers of call they made. Those are both leading. You're on the right path, though. So it should be a resulting metric, a performance-based metric. We're getting warmer with connects. A performance-based metric that's not what they're paid on, not what they're promoted for. All-time connects. These are all leading. I want you to keep going. Someone actually said it earlier. It's something that people think about all day long, and they mistake in their head that it is their lagging indicator. Ice cream. So what would be a good metric that you're on the right path as an SDR, but you're not paid for it? See, yes, Britt, open rate. It's a leading indicator. Good job, Britt. Everyone give it up for Britt. You're not paid for open rate, but people think about it all the time. They're like, well, this increased my open rate. I'm like, well, that doesn't matter if you didn't book more meetings or if those meetings or if they didn't become an SQL. but people talk about it all the time. Another is reply rate. So every buyer persona has these. It's not the end all be all. On base percentage for baseball. The leading indicator is how quickly they're swinging the bat or at what pitches, which is the thing that they would change to get there. But the lagging indicator is games won. So the value of knowing them is that your buyers think about them all the time. All the time. So those are the first three things. Yes, Darian, Moneyball is my biggest, Bill James is my biggest influence from a content perspective, all time. Love Bill James. The point being, the first thing you have to know about them is their metrics. How you can do this is simply go to Google KPIs for a CFO, KPIs for a, whatever it is, CSM, KPIs for director of product. There's always a quantifiable metric that measures a qualitative question on are they doing a good job. People are just, hypothetically, even a subjective sport like figure skating, they're like, how many triple axels did they do? From an artistic perspective, like they're trying to quantify even something that's subjective. So there's always, 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 always. This is the first place that you, if I may, I get one semi-inappropriate comment per session. I would try to get to the point where one of my reps told me this once. It was the most encouraging thing ever. They're like, yeah, so I'd gone out to the had 4 or 5 shots of whiskey and I still knew their indicators. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. So I'm not suggesting that anyone drinks. I don't even drink. However, you need to be to the point where if someone says CSM, you know exactly what they are. If someone says marketer, you know exactly what they are. Someone says SDR, you know exactly what they are. If someone says AE, you know exactly what they are. Because how it's going to affect your conversation is if I'm talking to a VP of sales, I'm not just talking about the volume of leads. I'm talking about the quality of those leads because they're measured on conversion and they're measured on closed won. I'm talking about the upsell potential. If I'm talking to an SDR, I'm not talking about closed won. Why? They don't really care. So it is the first way of any conversation to know those buyer personas metrics. So I would just go to Google and start aggressively studying. The second thing is and you can also go to Google for this. I've done it for buyer personas. I would say common problems for CFO. Common problems for a sales development rep. So I want everyone to go to their Google browser right now. Common problems for a SDR. And I want you to tell me what comes up. What articles come up. So I can make sure that everyone, chat GPT is great for this. I want someone to put in the chat. Go to Google, search common problems for an SDR, and tell me y'all put in one link that comes up. So I've got one here, 13 challenges faced by an SDR and how to solve them. So the reason we're kind of doing this, here you go. Here's one by Growbots. I actually know Growbots. Good job, Growbots, on the SEO campaign. So here's one by Too Much Pressure, Lack of Training. Here's one by Science. Here's one by Lead Feeder. Here's one by... So the reason we're doing this is not so y'all can get to know the SDR buyer persona. It's so to show you, it's so easy. Just common problems for my buyer persona, and I'm going to KPI everyone with. You need if I had 5 buyer personas, start today, and you have 1 buyer persona per week, and you need to every day spend 30 minutes studying about that buyer persona. So the common problems that they run into in a day-to-day. So I have in here, there are 3 types of problems. Metric problems, meaning what metric can they usually not hit? Are they trying to affect in a certain way? Goal problems, meaning what goal in relationship to that metric are they typically? And then tactical problems, things that they would change to affect the metric problems. There's 3 types of problems. All the definitions are in there. But a great place to start, just go to Google and start researching the crud out of your buyer. Say, what are their common struggles, challenges, problems within 2023? And it will just flood your screen with all kinds of data. So that's thing 2. Got 15 minutes left. The third is this I would study every night. When you're think of it as you're just putting money in the bank. I was thinking about this when I was running. I moved. I had never ever learned a word of French. I randomly, like a week ago, got caught in a scam. Someone took $6,000 out of my account. Why? My French wasn't good enough to figure out what was going on. Knowledge is power. So someone who's sitting there who speaks it fluently, they would have had power over me. I can't speak French, they can, so I'm at their mercy. So the more and more and more and more and more and more you know, the more valuable you are, more you can help your buyer. But essentially, the more people want you around because you possess something that they don't have. So I'm just like, study as much as you can. Just think of it as you are literally just depositing money in your bank because people want to be around you because of that knowledge. So common unknowns is the third one. So problems that are unknown to your buyer persona, root causes that are unknown to the buyer persona. A great example is email deliverability. It's a common unknown problem by SDR teams is quantity and quality. They don't realize that most of their emails aren't actually even lining up in the box. So on and on we go here. Unknown current impacts, unknown future impacts, unknown current event trigger. Like, so for future impacts, for instance, they know that they have the problem, but they don't know what impact is coming. Southwest knew they had a pain and a problem, but they did not know the future impact that was coming. So if you do know the future impact, you have systems their size of their, that are as old as theirs, what typically happens after 1 or 2 years when you go into a holiday season with the amount of users, you have just become invaluable to Southwest Airlines because you can help them uncover a future impact that they have no idea is coming. Otherwise, they would totally, Robert, they would have done something about it. Robert, with great power comes great responsibility. Totally. So in my mind, the responsibility that comes along with this knowledge is your responsibility is now to help people. So common unknowns, common current impacts. If I were to pick 3 of these, I would say find unknown root causes, find unknown future, and find unknown future event triggers. Hey, did you know that this mandate for car insurance is actually 6 months? So people are probably going to dip to around 10% buying rate as opposed to the 100% that they are now because of the mandate. If you know that future event trigger is happening, then you're valuable to your buyer. They didn't know that beforehand. Now they know because of you. They're thinking, what else does this person know that I don't? So if I don't learn anything from you in a discovery call that I didn't know beforehand, I'm not going to want to continue to. If I didn't learn anything from you in a cold call that I didn't know beforehand, I'm not going to want to continue the experience. Cold email, etc. The reason outbound is 6% conversion, inbound is 35, outbound is 6. It's because if the problem was big enough, they would have already done something about it. But how you can turn a pain into a problem is by finding an impact they didn't know. They weren't willing to solve for beforehand, but now they are, given that future impact. So the third thing I identify is commonly unknown things for your buyer. And then the fourth thing here is benchmarks and statistics. People love these. Industry average open rate, it's 15 to 25%. Industry average reply rate for outbound, 0.5 to 0.7%. Truth. Industry average conversion. People think that it's 20%, but it's not. It's 6% for outbound and it's 35 for inbound, and people falsely hire. Another statistic is not true is that 50% of marriages end in divorce. It's actually much lower. but I would just research industry statistics. 25% of AEs are forecasted to hit quota this year. 25. So when people come in the door and they're like, my reply rate's awful. I'm like, what's awful? They're like 5%. I'm like, they're actually not doing that bad. I had a buyer who just closed that was like, actually, even though you would argue, I said, can I tell you a little piece of candy? And he was like, what? I was like, actually, industry average for reply rate is 0.5 to 0.7. So you're actually not doing that bad. Now, there are a number of things we could do to get it better. The next call, he's like, that made me feel so good. But he's still buying. But I told him, actually, considering he wasn't doing that bad. So what he knows is common heart rate, right? Common calories intake, common weight percentages, BMI. They know what those benchmarks and statistics. So a benchmark just benchmarks you of what's normal for everyone else. What's normal quota attainment? How many meetings are people honestly getting on average? What's the average reply rate? How many emails are people commonly sending per day? 35 to 40. For calls, it's 40 for a full-time prospect. Only 4 connects. So people would be like, I don't get any connects. I'm like, well, how many is not many? They're like, I get 10. I'm like, actually, you get quite a few. So I'll ask the question. That's what I'm thinking in my head. I'm like, what time of day do you call? They're like, Friday afternoon. I'm like, that's why. But if they say, yeah, I don't get many connects. And I'm like, how many connects what's not? I get 2. I'm like, how many calls are you making? I had someone say this yesterday. Like, I made 175 calls and yielded 3 connects. I'm like, something's wrong. I'm like, what time of day are you calling? Well, I don't know. I was like, log into your outreach. We go into the instance. And I was like, oh, yep, they're calling Monday, Tuesday exclusively from 8 to 10 a.m. I'm like, there you go. And I said, can you go over to your dashboard? And I was looking through direct dials. I'm like, yep. And 85% of them were landlines. I'm like, this is why you're not getting any connects. He didn't know that, right? Some people say, do you have a good marriage? Or do you have a good relationship with your parents? Are you healthy? They don't know what healthy is because they haven't researched any of that. You know what healthy is. So this is one where you'll mop up. People love stats. I love stats. People love marks. That's thing 4. And now we got 9 minutes left. Those are all the fields. If I were to optimize for any part of this, it would be things 1 through 4. So I just want to review these really quickly, and then we go for each buyer in specific. But each buyer in specific is not going to be nearly as important as knowing these first 4. So I want you all to do me a favor. Metaphorically or physically, close your eyes. And if you can't name for all your buyers their common metrics, you have to Google that later. I demand it. Please. Open up a whole new world. Name common problems that they want to solve. Then Google that. If you can't close your eyes and name common things that they don't know, that's where you really need to dig in. Common things that they don't know. I'll give you a list. People don't commonly know that their email deliverability is low. If you have less than a 50% open rate, you have an email deliverability issue. People don't commonly know even how much their reps are calling. People don't commonly know that if you send more than 50 emails a day, you're going to exacerbate your email deliverability problems and make it worse. So actually, the whole mass blast thing, it doesn't work for multiple reasons. If you're sending more than 50 emails per day, you're hosing yourself. If your subject lines are the same, you're hosing yourself. So regardless of what the subject line is, if it's all the same, Google's like, they won't deliver them anymore. People don't commonly know the reply rate or open rate. People don't commonly know that you shouldn't call Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday afternoon, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. are the best call times, certainly for the US, B2B SaaS. So people just don't know that. They think it's all about quality or all about quantity, one of those two. People don't commonly know that one touch point on a person isn't enough for an entire account. People don't commonly know that the average conversion from people who request a demo to actually get a demo is 9%. So I would try to err there of how many unknowns can I find for them. And then thing number 4 is going to be, if you can't close your eyes and you can't name benchmarks and statistics, you need to be a library for these people. You know all of this that they don't know. So they want to answer your questions because they're like, maybe there's something else that they know that I don't know. Okay, got 6 minutes. We're going to cover the last 3 pieces. That is your buyers in general. That's where I'd spend 95% of my time, certainly in onboarding, is finding my buyers. Go to networking events. Reach out to your buyers on LinkedIn. Hey, can you just tell me about you? Don't try to sell them. I did this once. I went to LinkedIn and I was like, this is way back in the day. I was like, hi, LinkedIn. I'm selling to a CIO and I don't know what a CIO does. Can anyone help me? The CIO from Dell pinged in the thread. There was only 4 comments in that thread, and one was the CIO from Dell. They said, I'll give you a call. They gave me a call for 2 hours. I will never forget that. And told me all about what a CIO does, cares about. I was just shocked. I was shocked. So networking events, anything you have to do. So last 3 types, core static relevance. This is for each buyer in specific. I would research their role, their geo, and their industry. Those are going to be, and their sector. Are they public or are they private? So segment, industry, role, and sector. That's what I know for any buyer before I cold call them, or certainly before I go into discovery. But these will help you, but buckets 1 through 4 are really going to help you if you study your buyers at large. The 6th is motion triggers. So there are 4 types of motion triggers. This is basically for every buyer, if you're going to go into discovery or you're going to cold call them, you want to identify if there are any motion triggers. There are 4 types of motion triggers. Inbound triggers, meaning have they requested a demo before or have they come in through the chat before? Postbound triggers, which is have they taken a non-hand-raising marketing action? They downloaded content, they attended a webinar, they attended an event, they are a blog subscriber, they follow us on LinkedIn. Have they taken a postbound trigger? Because this will contextualize for you. If it's an inbound person, I'm like, they think that they need something. And so my job here is speed to lead, and I need to book the meeting and I figure out what they've self-diagnosed. If someone's taking a post, like they probably know who we are, probably not 100%, but they had interest in this topic. I'm going to guess for this like this kind of reason. So that's the second trigger. And then the 3rd and 4th are outbound triggers. This is, whereas inbound is they're raising their hand to talk to you, is they've taken a marketing action that's non-hand raising. Bridgebound is an action has happened to them or they have taken an action in market that has nothing to do with your company. So the 6th thing I'm identifying is what have they done recently? So of a trigger where the prospect took an action but has nothing to do with your company. Let's say that they bought an adjacent piece of tech. That's a trigger. They bought a sales engagement vendor, an outreach, or they bought data. They bought Zoom Info, for instance, but they haven't bought, and I'm outreach. And I'm like, I want to know that because where are they going to put all that data? They're going to have a problem because what are they going to do? Put in Excel spreadsheets and email one by one like the good olden days? Wild Wild West with Jane? No, that means that they're likely going to have a problem, or people who have some kind of history with you. They requested a demo and didn't actually schedule one. They went through discovery, but they didn't actually buy. And then there are triggers that happen to them. They didn't do anything, something that happened to them, which is a second kind of bridge-bound trigger, meaning it's tax season, a seasonal change, or the pandemic hit, or a market shift. So something happened to them that has nothing to do with your company. The pandemic hits. It wasn't like Zoom got all of a sudden a lot better at selling. The market took an action on everyone, and all of a sudden there was a massive problem. People needed to find a way to, communicate remotely. So this is thing 6. And then the last thing here, and then I'm going to see if we have any questions and close out that I would research about my buyer in specific. So the first 4 buckets I would do in general, study all along until your eyes are bleeding. These last 3 are if you're having a cold call, or especially if you're having a discovery call with a buyer in specific. The 7th thing I would want to know is I would want to pull out personalization field. This is a communication. You respect your buyer, that you know your buyer, and that you've invested in your buyer. Most people, from a statistical perspective, if they will either match or underscore your investment. So if you haven't researched them and given them time, they don't want to give you time back, is the punchline. So the 6 types of personalization things that you can research on LinkedIn is, have they authored any content? Self-author content. Have they written a post, article? Typically people are going to post less than 1% of LinkedIn is active. Active being defined as they post once a week or more. Second is, have they engaged with anything? So liked anything, shared anything, commented on anything. Typically people make about a post a month, but they'll engage with things several times a week. So they log on to LinkedIn several times per day, they just don't post. The third is self-identified traits. This is anything they wrote about themselves on LinkedIn in 3 places: the About Me section, the company line, and the headline. So like, Beck's a great executor, building SaaS teams or whatever. So that's self-identified traits, stuff that they wrote about themselves in 3rd person. 4th is junk drawer. This is non-business related stuff about them. So, schools attended, charities that they're giving to, things that they do in their free time. 5th is background centric, anything about their background, tenure at a country, between companies, how long have they been in their current role, what are the things that they've done professionally. So I'm getting a good background. And then company centric is the last thing. I need to study about the company. Has the company made any interesting moves recently? So here's the punchline with this bucket, and then we're going to close out. Every single time I have a discovery call, I hold myself to the same standard that I tell other people. I give myself a minute and a half to pull up their profile and get a read on them. Who are they? Where do they live? How long have they been there? What are they doing? And I size them up from a profile perspective. And I tease out data points because it helps me build a viewpoint before I go into the room. However, once I'm in that room on discovery, I'm in full diagnosis mode. So it's very similar to a doctor gets a fact sheet beforehand. How much you weigh, what your blood pressure is, how many times you've been in before, what are your pre-existing conditions, what are your allergies, all of that. That's mandatory before they come into the room. That's what buckets 5, 6, and 7 are. Once you get into discovery, once they come in the room, they're like, tell me why you came in today. And they start diagnosing. Right. You're a scientist. Because there are probably a lot of things that they don't know. So here's the punchline, and we're going to close out for the day. Our buyers need us to know them. And the great thing is, it's not hard. We just need to start with them, and they will want you on the line more than you know what to do with. So if y'all would jump in the chat, how many of you, yes or no, believe that you know everything that there is to know about sales? Yes, I do know everything that there is to know about sales, or no, I don't know everything there is to know about sales. So here's the great news. Look at all these no's. Thanks. Thank you, Victoria. My day. Look at all these no's. People are like, just because I'm in the role, just because I'm a CTO doesn't mean that I know everything I would know about being a CTO. Just because I'm an SDR doesn't mean I know everything there is to know about being an SDR. Just because I'm a human and I have a body doesn't mean I know what's going on inside of it. Just because I know that I'm sick doesn't mean I know why. So the great news is all you have to do is start with your buyers and say, I'm going to learn. Here's the KPI I'm going to give you. And then I promise I will let everyone go. I mandate to myself that I have to learn one new concept or theory, one new statistic, and 5 different new words every week. Because I'm like, that's the input that I need to change. So if you just hold yourself accountable and say, I'm going to start today, I'm going to learn one new thing about my buyers every single day, you will be astounded at the amount of information that you are going to accumulate, but also how much you can help your buyer in the room. So when you help your buyer, they want you around, which is great news for them and us. So I think that that can start today. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. Even though it's a Friday, yes, we'll send out the recording. Thank you again to Victoria for saying that. That was so, so nice of you to say. Thank you for coming to all the webinars. This was webinars 1 through 5 of Diagnostic Selling. All of them are on YouTube from front to end, from diagnostic selling to challenging to problems to all of this. But I mean it when I say thank you to everyone who has been involved in this process. It's absolutely incredible. And if anyone is going to be at Inbound in 2 weeks, I'm going to be there. I oddly enough, they gave me 90 minutes. So where I'm going to be doing a 90-minute session fired up and live. So if anyone is there, I would love to say hi. But thank you so much, everyone, for showing up today. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.